Hello and welcome to Warcraft Daily for today, the 18th of December 2013. Today's show is brought to you by the links in the description, which now include Green Man Gaming. So in today's news, we're going to talk a tiny bit about flex scaling, but not really the slant that there's been at the minute, and then some Wintervale 2013 changes, and a roundup of the blue stuff. And there's actually some very good discussion points coming in with what the blues have been saying on Twitter. So first of all, flexible scaling. Now, we all know what's happened in that they've scaled up to remove breakpoints and a few different things like that, but I have one or two, I suppose, concerns. This is more just playing devil's advocate, but I suppose often devil's advocate is a role that should be played. Personally, I am, of course, for the changes that have been made, but I just think these are some points that are really worthy of discussion. So first of all, they said that it's actually comparatively easier the more people you get in a flexible group. Essentially, as more people come in, the boss's health and damage scale up. This is all what we know, but it scales up disproportionately to the DPS and I suppose health output of the raid, in that like the raid is getting more and more health and damage, but I suppose in terms of a percentage-wise, this is happening faster than the boss is, so it will actually be slightly easier for a larger group of people. Now, what does this mean? Well, I think it's interesting because it really is, in a way, encouraging people to fill spots. And if it wasn't that, then they probably wouldn't have said so. Like, they did flat out just say that it's easier the more people you bring with you. Not by a great deal, but certainly by a bit. And what this means is, I suppose, a lot of people are just going to be grabbing everyone under the sun in order to get in. Now, I think this is a little bit strange because in terms of an organizational side of things, you are really asking for... well, I nearly think this is light in the organization because you're nearly just asking for tons and tons of people. I suppose the issue is, can you get enough good people to actually not like make up for the fact that it's easier? I suppose perhaps the reason why it's a little bit easier as you go, as you get more people, is that there's a higher chance that the additional people you get will be kind of like above and beyond your core raiding group, and that they won't be as good in terms of their performance, and therefore that's why the bosses are trying to keep up with that. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Possibly it's a little bit of social engineering to form larger groups of players, to keep them together and sort of keep things a bit more cohesive. I know social engineering, this sounds far more nefarious than it really is, but social engineering is really just a way of, I suppose, controlling habits of a player base or something like that. So I'd say that maybe a lot of these moves of flex are just to break the kind of barriers and socially engineer people to be a little bit more social. I just think it's interesting that a part of this is actually being done via, or at least possibly a part of this could be done via the difficulty scaling for flexible. Now, I do have one issue, right? And honestly, personally, I think this is absolutely the correct, positive way to do it for the current flexible system. But in Warlords of Draenor, we are going to be having heroics being flexible. Now, of course, in Warlords of Draenor, heroic is not what it is today. Essentially, today we have normal, well, no, we have flex, normal, and heroic, okay? But most people are doing flex, so what Blizzard said is, well, if most people are doing flex, then we may as well just call it normal, because that makes sense, right? So today's flexible mode is called normal, and today's heroic, normal mode is called heroic, and then today's heroic mode is called mythic. But the thing is that in heroic in Warlords of Draenor, it's going to have the flexible system, and I think I'm just a little bit concerned that flex, or normal 20, or not normal, yes, that heroic 25 could maybe be a little bit easier than heroic 10 in Warlords, and I just don't think that's the right way to do it. I definitely am actually kind of concerned about that, and I do actually have a further concern when we talk about the breakpoint system. So the breakpoint system is basically what we know in that, say, there's, I think Malkrok's really the easiest example, so perhaps it could be that maybe you have 12 people, and this means that you have a 80% chance for 2 Void Zones to spawn, and a 20% chance for a third one. Or maybe, I think it's 3 and 4, but whatever. Now here's the problem, right? That fourth one, because there's only a 20% chance of it happening, is a very large difficulty spike. Now, in flexible difficulty, that's really okay to deal with because it's not stupidly hard, like where an extra Void Zone will kill you. But I think that when we move into Warlords of Draenor and the heroics are flexible, there's definitely going to be a bit of an issue there where if that extra, like that 20% chance kind of rolls, then you really are having a very significant spike up in difficulty, because I know normal is not ultra hard, right, in comparison to maybe what it used to be in some other expansions, but personally I think it's a really nice, solid difficulty level, And there are definitely times where I'd imagine on Malkorok, if you're maybe an 11-player group or a 12-player, where an extra Void Zone spawning would really screw you up. And I'm only saying Malkorok because it's it's just a very easy to understand boss, I suppose. But really anything, the numerical problem with an extra thing spawning, especially when it's relatively quite rare for it to spawn, could really screw people over. And then another thing is that it really changes up your strategies. Here's an example, like there's some things where you know there will always be X amount of void zones or things happening, and therefore you position your group based on that, because that controls where the things spawn, and it kind of makes sense. But if you don't know how many are actually going to spawn, because maybe there's a 20% chance that an extra one will spawn, then you're going to have a bit of an issue. And what I'd nearly be worried with, right, is the people are going to really only form groups, like for heroic raids and warlords, when it's certain that none of this breakpoint stuff will happen. So for an example, you're only going to get maybe a 10-player group because they don't want to deal with that 20% chance annoyance, or maybe the next time is like a 15-player group where you're still not going to have a 20% or 40% chance of an extra thing spawning. Perhaps it could end up like this. I know part of this is definitely playing devil's advocate, but I think there are possibly some issues there that really are worthy of discussion, because honestly, if your group dies because you had the unlucky roll and the extra 20% thing happened and maybe an extra void zone or something spawned and that wiped your group, what's going to happen is people will blame it on BS RNG. And that is something that's a bit of a problem, because instead of players being frustrated at it being their own skill that failed them, they're frustrated at the game for killing them. So yeah, these are just points. Overall, I think that is a very good system, and honestly, I just kind of thought maybe it's worthy of a bit of devil's advocate, a bit of talk, maybe another slant on the whole thing. But overall, yeah, do let me know what you think. So the next thing in the news is the Winter's Veil holiday. And, well, yeah, I mean, I did mention its existence yesterday, but I suppose there's one or two different things that have been added. So to this year's gift, which we get, is the Crashin' Thrashin' Flyer. And it's essentially just a little flyer thing. You use it, you fly about the place with it, and you can shoot guys. Well, you can shoot other flyers. And there's one or two achievements to do with this. I think one of them is Danger Zone, something like that. It's, of course, like Top Gun reference. And you just have to shoot down another player's one. Overall, it's a fun little gift, and it's very much in the theme of, or well, in the same vein of the ones that we have previously been given. Also, the stolen present can now include some of the old toys, including the gaudy Winter's Veil sweater, the pigskin, and the football. On the topic of fucking winter sweaters, if I see another one, I think I'll go mad. Anyway, let's move on to another thing. Oh, and to the guy who said over Twitter to me, no, they're not just a thing for movies, they are everywhere. Grr. Anyway, the next thing is there's a new battle pet. It's called the Rotten Helper, and you can get this from the thing of a little box, stolen presents, whatever it's called. It's from that daily quest, and it's a humanoid battle pet. Looks, I suppose, exactly what it looks like. Make your own thoughts up on. I'll stick it up on the screen. Now, they've also made the, I think it's called the Hackerus Mince Pie or something like that. Maybe I just wrote it down in my show notes. But they've made it a little bit easier to obtain. It now costs 100 gold and can be found in the Stolen Daily Present. You can also buy some of the 2012 gifts, which include the pigskin and the football, from a vendor, and they are under 50 gold each. Finally, some of the Siege Wargrim bosses will drop hats. These are General Nazgrim and Galakras. So overall, I suppose some cool stuff. No big changes, which I suppose is unfortunate because, as I said yesterday, I mean, well, okay, just watch yesterday's show, you know my thoughts, it's in there towards the end. Anyway, let's move on to some Twitter things. So the first thing will come from our good friend Celestian, and he said that there are some class abilities which will trigger from crits, and then there may be some which trigger from multi-strikes. Now this is all kind of interesting. What is multi-strike? You don't know what it is. I mean, you know what crit is, right? But multi-strike, well, it's a thing, right? It's a new secondary that's being added in Warlords of Draenor, and what it means is you have a chance for attacks to happen a second time. I think it's just the damage component of the attack for 30% damage. Now, what's interesting is that these will actually be able to trigger some class abilities. Now, this definitely seems like there's going to be some weird damage spikes. And honestly, if multi-strikes are in PvP, and they could very much, I suppose, with a near perfect storm scenario, if the player has a lot of multi-strike, could this lead to a lot of class procs and things like that going off, and burst damage being a little bit too high? I suppose that definitely is a worry. But still, I think this multi-strike thing is very cool. And what I think is cool about it is that if it does play in with these class abilities, once again, it gives us more reactive combat. I think a problem that some of the hotkey MMOs have got is that, like, a lot of the time people just think, yeah, you do a rotation, that's all you do, there's no reactive stuff. And, well, if they can have things like multi-strikes come in and trigger some cool class abilities or spice up the gameplay a bit, then what's going to happen is you have more reactive gameplay because maybe one of your class abilities procs, there's a new button for you to do something, flashes and lights up, and stuff like that's fun. I know that, like, playing a monk, even though I'm level 32, it's still kind of fun to get procs on the Tiger Palm and the sweeping kick thingy, just like it is in my Arms Warrior when you get a proc on, say, Colossal Smash. It's kind of fun, you know, it's cool. So overall, I think that's definitely quite cool. Now, finally, we just have two little things from Ghostcrawler, which he mentioned over the last day. First of all, he said that he doubts that Silvermoon will ever be flyable, which is a little bit of a pity, I suppose. That said, he did say the time investment would be too great, and I completely agree. It would be nice to have Silvermoon flyable, and actually, some of the architecture of that place is my favorite in the game. I think it looks gorgeous, but I'd rather have developers working on Warlords of Draenor than I would them working on Silvermoon. I'm sorry to the people who love that city, but I think it's a priority thing on a game like this, when the development is a constant thing, I guess. But yeah, hey, it's a really nice city, and I just wish there was a reason to go back to the Isle of Keldanas, because I fucking love that place. I know sometimes the quests got a little bit grindy back in Burning Crusade, but just the architecture and the feel and the music and everything was just perfect to me. Anyway, so finally to summarize, not to summarize, to like talk about the final thing that Ghostcrawler said. Well, he said that to summarize the dungeon discussion, if it were up to him, and of course it's not, there would be a hard dungeon for friends and an easy dungeon for looking for dungeons. So essentially what he's saying is there would be a hard mode dungeon, like I suppose a mythic dungeon nearly, for friends, and I suppose in terms of difficulty these could be similar to Cataclysm Heroics. Personally, I'd be okay with them being harder than Cataclysm Heroics, because Cataclysm Heroics, if you were in a group of competent people and you're from your guild, you could breeze through them, and they were relatively easy because it was just basic mechanical execution. The problem is that in looking for dungeons, they just weren't fun. I know a lot of people are going to say in the comments, because I know they have in previous videos, that, well, you know what, just make them hard and the scrubs will step up to the plate. You know what? I wish that was true. I fucking wish the people would step up to the plate and have a challenge. But the issue is that in a game like this, what ends up happening is people say, OMG, you son of a... Well, okay, no. You know what? If people said son of a bitch, it would be much nicer. They usually say lots of terrible, annoying words and just... Not that I even give a shit about swearing, but, you know, they're just douches, right? You don't want to just go into a game to be called a bastard and a wanker and words like that. You know, well, okay. Some people don't. Personally, I find it really gratifying when people swear at me. It's one of the reasons I love first-person shooters. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was actually a guilty pleasure of mine for a long time, because I was really fucking good at it, and I'd constantly be called a hacker, and people be swearing at me, and it felt great. But anyway, that's kind of a digression from the point. The point is, it sucks to just get random abuse from groups, and have lots of people being negative, and generally, a lot of people are faster to be negative about things than they are to be positive. I know I'm a cynical bastard sometimes, but if it's in a group, I would personally much rather help out, you know, the person who's not doing enough DPS. I want to help them out. And hell, even sometimes when you do try to help out that person, they just call you a bastard and leave, or try to vote kick you or something. And the problem is that when the dungeons are a bit harder, people are not stepping up to the plate. They just go in, they rage, then they right-click their username, and they hit leave group. It's very annoying, times like when you were in the Stone Core, and it's funny actually, Stone Core, okay, maybe it wasn't my favourite, but Grim Patrol was one of my favourite dungeons, and you would always get up to like a particular boss, and everyone would start quitting the group, which was not fun, because for the players who enjoyed that difficulty level, and still wanted to do matchmaking, well, they couldn't enjoy it, because people would just keep on leaving, and they couldn't get a solid group together. And they'd end up just having a lot of their time wasted, because the Valor points were only a thing you got at the very end. So essentially, I think the best way to do it is you have Looking for Dungeon mode, which is harder than Mists of Pandaria Heroics, let's be honest, and they've already said that they will be harder than Mists of Pandaria. I'd say make them... Maybe a little bit harder than what the Wrath ones were, but certainly not as hard as... I don't even want to say hard when I'm talking about the Cataclysm ones. The Cataclysm ones weren't hard, they just required coordination. So I'd say make them easier than Cataclysm, harder than Wrath, and then have a extra tier called Mythic, so you could do a Mythic dungeon, and this was something which couldn't be match made. It was meant for a pre-made group, it had a gear reward, unlike challenge modes. I think one of the issues with challenge modes is, fine, it's nice for prestige, but if you don't like that transmo gear, is there a great point in doing it other than bragging rights? That's only going to appeal to a very certain subset of people, and maybe they're not the people who just want to have a challenging dungeon experience that doesn't have a time trial. That's another issue as well. Sometimes you want to be able to just go through nice and slow, like at your own pace, and just deal with everything perfectly. That maybe challenge modes don't cater to that, and then also the complete lack of a gear reward from them. So I think, yeah, Mythic dungeons which give you slightly, well not slightly, like definitely better gear than Heroics would be an ideal solution. I just don't think it's going to happen in Warlords, which makes me really sad. So, yeah, whatever. If you have any responses or things like that, leave them in the description. That's the end of the show. If you would like to support what I'm doing here, then there are links in the description. You can buy things from Amazon or Green Man Gaming, both, of course, completely reputable places, and I'll get a small cut, just a way to help out the channel. Yeah, with that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you tomorrow.